End of the day with Ray. Hello, my friends. Well, folks, today we're going to jump on the gigantic Sharp Interactive board. I want to share some thoughts regarding Landa Digital Printing. What a financial disaster that turned out to be. And I want to ask some questions of Konica Minolta. And the first question, right off the bat, above the logos, I'm asking this: will Konica Minolta be the next industrial print disaster? And I think it's a fair question. And folks, when you think about Landa Digital Printing, a lot of dreams, a lot of aspirations. And guess what? A lot of those dreams and aspirations woke up in a damn nightmare. I can't even imagine what the end users of the Landa Digital Print Press are dreaming today. As FIMI picks up Landa for $80 million. Not a success story by any stretch of the imagination. And so when you think about what's going on in that industrial print space, when you think about what investors are thinking about as they look at Landa Digital Printing, as they look at the industry overall, what are they thinking about? What are the customers thinking about? And ladies and gentlemen, I think it's a fair question for Konica Minolta because financially as a company, Konica Minolta struggled for many years. I mean, you see the numbers. And if they took their industrial print business and put it in its own business unit, all by itself, could it survive? I don't think it could. You know, they have a business unit called professional print where they have industrial print, they have their production print, they have a marketing thing in there, they're getting rid of some of that, but it's all lumped together. If they took that industrial print, the high-end industrial print business, and put it in its own bucket, its own business, could it survive on its own? And if the answer is no, then you got to ask Konica the question, should you just dump industrial print? Why the hell are you doing any business that can't survive on its own? I mean, what do they think? If they sell someone one of these big, giant industrial print machines, they're going to get all the MFPs in the hallways? I mean, what the hell? I mean, they need to think about it because buyers are thinking about it. And what's going on with Landa Digital Printing is giving an awareness to the buyers too, folks. And if you don't think the buyers are going to start being a little bit more demanding of the OEMs they do business with, and by demanding, I think they're going to start demanding audited financials. I really do. You don't spend a couple $1,000,000 for a press and hope it all works out. So we've seen the headlines, the court approves the Landa rescue deal. I don't see it as a rescue deal. I see where FIMI, picked up some pretty interesting patents. What are they going to do with that? But does anybody really believe that FIMI is going to run Landa Digital Printing in the way the founder ran it? I mean, hopefully they're going to run it with a little bit more financial stewardship. But at the end of the day, I don't think the dreams are the same at all. And time will tell. I remember when Landa Digital Printing ran to the court system for protection against its creditors. I did an episode on it and I shared 2 articles. One of the articles, I complimented the author. I said, thanks for writing this article. It was educational. It also prepared not only the marketplace, the other vendors, the other industry players, but it's also preparing the end users for a probability. And then there was another article that I read that I was disgusted by. It was a bunch of whitewashed nonsense that I brought up. I was pretty adamant about it. I said, what are you doing? It was just basically a copied and pasted thing from Landa Digital Printing. And the problem with that is, if you go back and read that article, the one that I was complaining about, it didn't prepare anybody for anything. And if that's the only place you got your information, guess what? You'd have woke up shocked when FIMI picks up Landa for $80 million. That's why I was being, critical of the article. Because there was a couple of snowflakes out there that got a little bit upset that Ray would have the audacity, to criticize an article. But holy smokes, ladies and gentlemen, I think the industry's media and analysts need to be preparing the industry for what's going on. Especially those that, claim to be the expert. And I'm no damn expert in industrial print, okay? But when I see headlines out there where Landa Digital Printing is going to the Israel court systems to get protection against creditors, that definitely catches my attention. So I'm reading up on the court hearing and all this stuff. And folks, I just want to share some thoughts on this. I found this in Print Monthly. This is a quote from Landa's founder at a hearing where basically the company's a financial train wreck mess. They're trying to figure out what to do with it. This is a quote from the founder. Landa could be the largest printing company in the world. Since Gutenberg invented printing, the major players have all been German. We will bring the crown of the global printing industry to Israel and contribute significantly to the country's GDP. And when I read that, I'm like, okay, should delusion even be allowed in a hearing? And I kind of understand now why FIMI, it doesn't need the founder to stick around. But folks, I mean, I think sometimes people have these great dreams and great aspirations, but they got to turn out profitably. They got to make sense. I mean, you could have the greatest invention in the world, but if it's too costly to deliver in the marketplace, something's flawed in the business plan, right? But when you listen to the dream still going on in the heads, you got to ask yourself, holy crap. So I want to talk about some more articles because I think this kind of ties right into why I believe Konica should just get out of the industrial print business. I've been making fun of this for a while now, but you know, there was a leader at Konica Minolta in the industrial print space that actually did an interview and talked about how dealers could be selling industrial technology printing equipment. And I did an episode on that and made fun of it. I mean, I thought it was so stupid. And there's still articles out there about this. But let me just read this headline to you. The market is poised to grow, driven by a handful of manufacturers. Textile printing is an untapped opportunity for office technology dealers. I got to stop there. Just a bunch of crap. It was just ridiculous. And I'm thinking, you know, when we have Print United this year, I think Kaneka Monulta should have some people in the booth, the office technology dealers that have sold the industrial textile printing. Line up all these dealers. Get them in the booth. They could go through the deals they did. They could talk about it. Yeah, you know, we went in there to sell them document management and we walked out with an industrial textile printing machine. I'd really like to know the details on that, the details on how the office technology folks are successful in industrial print. And the reason I'm beating this to death and I'm kind of, you know, getting a little bit vocal about this because it's this kind of nonsense that is so distracting from reality in our industry. You know, so distracting. So I got to ask the question, how many of these textile, inkjet industrial machines has the office copier dealer sold? 1, 2, 3, 4? They're knocking them out of the park? They're selling more of those than the Biz Hub? I mean, is it more successful than the Workplace Hub, as an example? When you look at Konica Minolta's cafeteria, if you will, in their professional print space, they got some nice equipment. I'm not going to say they don't have nice equipment. I hear the equipment's kind of nice. They got the digital label and packaging, decorative and print embellishment, MGI. We'll talk about MGI in a minute. You know, they got the digital presses in the production space. They got some really good stuff. I think they got a lot of stuff. And the reason they got a lot of stuff is because Konica Minolta, you know, at the end of the day, they like to chase the squirrel. Oh, let's go get that machine. But folks, with all this stuff, I got to ask you a question over there at Konica Minolta. What are the solutions around the equipment? You have so much equipment. What are the solutions around it? Do you have experts in that area? You know, what's the expertise around the hardware? You know, it seems like a lot of people are going in and out of Konica. We're seeing that with a lot of these OEMs. You know, I worked here one day, now I'm over here, now I'm going to go back over here. I mean, it's kind of a revolving door. And I would have to really ask this: what's the product marketing manager? Do you even have any? I mean, you know, when you're reading articles about how the Office Technology Group is perfectly positioned to sell industrial textile printing, it makes you really want to question the marketing for sure. Like, who the hell's in charge of marketing over there at Konica Minolta? Because that just seemed to be so ridiculous from day one. So I got to ask this question: how many of these are in the field? The AlphaJet, big giant machine. That thing's big. Holy crap, that's a big machine. Have we sold 10, 5, 6? Do we have them out in the field on demo? Are they out in the field to get out of warehouses? Are we giving people great deals to get them out in the field? Are dealers making any money on it? Great questions. You see, these folks never want to answer those kind of questions. They just want to, you know, hopefully, hey, will you put this on your blog? Here, we wrote some stuff down. Here's what we're doing. What's the latest thing Konica Minolta's doing? Y'all remember? I mean, it's hard to keep track because they do things differently every day. But the paper thing, remember that? I did an episode on that, the paper thing. Does the paper go in this machine? Just like, holy crap. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's talk about MGI. And I've talked about this before, but at one time, that's a fantastic thing. Dreams, oh my gosh, it's going to be amazing. Embellishment. Well, at the end of the day, they had a $95 million impairment loss at MGI. So aspirations, kind of hit reality. Impairment charge. I did notice something I found interesting, so I got to give them some credit over there at Konica Minolta. If you look at the industrial print revenue, for the industrial print on its own, the revenue, they had the largest revenue increase quarter on quarter in the third quarter of 2024 going into the fourth quarter. The revenue grew by 50% in the industrial print space. That's the largest growth quarter on quarter in 24 straight quarters. And I thought, well, that's kind of interesting. It grew by 50%. So then I started thinking, well, what the hell did they do? And I think that's a fair question. Like, what did you do? Why did the revenue in the fourth quarter of FY 2024 grow by 50% over the third quarter of 2024? Because, in the first quarter of 2025, it's back down to the normal number. But what happened? Did you just sell a whole bunch of stuff, got a lot of revenue, but you didn't get a lot of profit, right? Because, they lump it all together over there. They call it professional print. Of course, Konica Minolta would like to call it the business contribution profit. And, of course, I put the bull taking a poop because I think that's ridiculous. I want to know what the operating profit. So if you look at the professional print business for their first quarter, for the year they're in right now, which will end in March of 2026, $426.5 million total revenue. Operating profit of $2.7 million or 1%, basically a rounding error, a little hiccup. They'd have lost money, right? I'll give them credit. They got 1% operating profit. Well, folks, think about it. Out of the $426.5 million, only $67 million of that's coming from industrial print. $67 million at the run rate. You're going to do what? $280, $300 million for the year in industrial print. And again, I keep asking why the hell are you even doing it? And if you're doing it so well, then you should tell us what the operating profit is specifically for the industrial print space. And I'm going to be honest with you. If I was a customer and I'm going to go buy some really, really expensive piece of equipment from Konica Minolta in the industrial print space, I'm going to want to know what their damn profitability is in that space. And if they don't want to tell me, I'm probably not going to buy from them. Because when I look at the company overall, I'd be a little horrified. And so they'd have to explain that, and then they'd have to explain, you guys, it's a small business. In the scheme of things at Konica, are you going to be around? There'd be a lot of questions people could be asking, right? I think they'd be asking. I looked at Kodak's numbers, Fujifilm's numbers, of course, Konica Minolta. Do you remember when Kodak published their second quarter numbers and their statement on going concern got a whole lot of people concerned? I did an episode on it. And folks, when you look at their industrial print business over there, which is all that Kodak does, it's all industrial print. Their revenue for the first 6 months is $343 million, and they had a operational EBITDA loss of $13 million. So not going really well. And when I dug into the 10Q and 10Ks on those episodes, I showed you how the revenue was declining in the print business. It's kind of alarming. I was a little bit concerned about that. But ladies and gentlemen, you don't think if people are buying from Kodak and they're looking at what happened at Landa Digital Print, they're not asking questions like, that going concern statement concerns us. You saw what just happened at Landa Digital Printing. Of course they're going to ask these questions, aren't they? And I got to tell you, if I'm Fujifilm, I'm going to bring it up. I'm going to bring it up with customers. Why wouldn't I? Because Fujifilm has always been profitable. They haven't been a disastrous mess financially. Ladies and gentlemen, Konica Minolta, my gosh, their FY 2024, which ended in March of 2025, their operating profit loss was over $400 million. They've had a miserable time performing financially. Going back as far as 2019, they had a 1% operating profit in 2019. In 2020, they lost money. 2021, they lost money. 2022, they lost money. This is terrible stuff, right? And then in 2023, they squeak out a 2.5% operating profit. Of course, in 2024, all that went to hell. And Konica's really good with their press releases. And I shared this when I went through their first quarter numbers. I don't want to be redundant here, but they used the word increase like 3 times. And I said, the hell with the word increase, focus on the decrease because that's the important one. And when they talked about the operating profit for the professional print business had a decrease of 73.2% year on year, that's alarming. So the hell with all the increases in business contribution profit. It really matters about the operational profit. So ladies and gentlemen, let me wrap it up with a couple of questions. Is Konica Minolta a serious industrial print player? In my mind, no. Is the industrial print business at Konica Minolta able to operate as its own entity? And when I look at the numbers, I got a lot of questions on that one. Does Konica Minolta currently shift any cost out of the industrial print business unit? I mean, it's easy to hide money when you're this conglomerate. But what's the reality of the industrial print business completely on its own? Could it survive? And finally, can Konica Minolta actually become consistently profitable as a company, as a whole company? Because the last few years, it's been pretty much a mess. And what has caused the dismal financial performance over the last half decade? This isn't something that just popped up. This has been going on for a long time. So what's the fundamental issues at Konica Minolta? And will Konica Minolta ever be held accountable to answer these types of questions? Maybe Print United is a great place where they could start. They could come in, they could bring in the finance folks, they could share with the whole world what the industrial print business is doing at Konica Minolta, how it's profitable. They could talk about their MIF. They could talk about all the machines that are in the field and what kind of volumes they're running. They could talk about all the dealers that are selling these and how successful they are with Konica Minolta. Wouldn't that be fantastic? Wouldn't it be fantastic if the OEMs had to actually talk about what they're doing instead of what they're going to do? Wouldn't it be nice if the OEMs actually talked about what reality is instead of what they dream? Just some things to think about, my friends, because we all know this. Status quo is the killer of all that'll be invented. Don't get stuck there. I'll see you all tomorrow.